I'll call the October 2nd Select Board meeting to order. I think we had one announcement to add to the agenda, but other than that, there were no changes. You wanted to?
The warrant article? Yeah. Can you, warrant article? Citizen warrant article.
And the
All
meeting
right.
is being audio and video recorded.
Thank you. So I just wanted to bring the board and the public's attention to a couple of things that relate to the 2020 annual town meeting, which, mark your calendars, is Saturday, April 4th. Mark that down. Citizen warrant article, the time frame for citizen warrant articles opens tomorrow, October 3rd, and closes Monday, November 18th at 4 p.m. We've updated our guide to preparing a citizen warrant article. We looked at a number of other towns to see what they have. Most of them are pretty much the same. The town of Natick has something like a 30-page guide to how to do a citizen warrant article. So ours is 3 pages. So there's going to be a packet that people can get at the town clerk's office. It's also available online and in the town administration office. If you wish to submit a warrant article, we urge you to read over the guide. We've revamped the submittal form, which Erica's coming to. This is what it looks like. So you put your name and what you think the title of your article is, which potentially changes as the warrant develops, but we need some information from you: name, address, email, phone number. And then you can either type in your article or submit it on an attached paper. And then you need the signatures of at least 10 voters registered in Nantucket, not anywhere else, in Nantucket. Sometimes people don't recognize that. We suggest people get more than 10 signatures because sometimes people think they're registered to vote here, but actually they're not. So we've got space for 15. You can certainly get more than that, and we urge you to get probably 15 to 20. We also have a questionnaire that we have been talking with the Finance Committee a little bit about and the Capital Program Committee. And the questionnaire is meant to get information from citizens as to basically what their article is all about. What is it meant to do in sort of plain language? How much do you think it's going to cost? Who do you think is going to implement it? That sort of thing. We try to make it friendly and easy to fill out, and it's not required, but it will make the processing and review of your article a little bit easier. So this packet, again, is in the town clerk's office, it's online, and it's in the town admin office. And the deadline for citizen warrant articles, again, is Monday, November 18th, and the timeline for it is on the website.
It's strongly suggested, though not required, because it makes the hearing with the FinCom, et cetera, much easier. You have to be able to think through what you're doing and how you're doing it.
Yes, thank you.
I've served and seen people that did it or didn't do it, and it's a big difference.
Definitely. That's it.
Okay. Is there any public comment tonight for anything that's not otherwise on our agenda? Hearing none. There's no new business that I'm aware of. Approval of payroll warrants and treasury warrants.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. We have 2 consent items. Well, we have some gift acceptances.
Motion to accept all gifts and also send letters of thanks.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. And we have a resignation from the Conservation Commission. We normally send a letter of thanks.
Yeah, I'd make a motion to accept the resignation and send a letter. Do we send a letter or with thanks? Yeah.
And we'll be advertising it.
Thanks. I would just note that the resignation isn't going to be effective until the end of the Concom's business on October 23rd.
Okay. So I'd make that note in the motion. Accept it as of October 23rd.
Can we pre-advertise the opening? Would be good to not leave that vacant for too long. Committee reports. We have a couple.
A second.
Sorry. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Now moving on to committee reports. We have a couple of committees giving us updates tonight. First is Nantucket Historical Commission.
Thank you, Madam Chairman, Chairwoman, and Select Board. I'm Hillary Hedges-Rayport. I'm Chair of the Nantucket Historical Commission. I have a number of my fellow commissioners here, so I'd actually like to call my meeting to order. We did post a meeting to run concurrent, so I'll call the meeting of the Nantucket Historical Commission to order now at 6:05. I'd like to also just introduce very quickly the commissioners who are here: Mickey Rowland, Clement Durkees, Georgia Raisman, Thomas Murray Montgomery, and Mary Bergman. So thank you so much for hearing our report. We're a newly reinstated commission, as you know, and the commission has received a couple formal Section 106 review requests. One of them is active and ongoing, which is the Surfside Road, Bartlett Road roundabout. We received that request from the Mass DOT. And then the other one is really sort of overdue because the project is underway, as you know, and it's Milestone Road, the safety and accessibility improvements. We felt, and we did discuss this with, we discussed it with Libby, we discussed it with members of the select board, and we discussed it with Andrew Vorse that we might have a look just to flag any issues, and we were encouraged in that effort. So we went ahead and submitted this report. I just want to say that the objective of this project is a safer road, and we will have a safer road once this project is completed, mainly because of the changes to the intersections and the changes to the passing zone. I also want to thank our transportation planner, Mike Burns, who made this project happen. He's attracted over $2 million of grants to Nantucket to improve this road, and I think that we wouldn't have that if he hadn't really been on it for really many years. And there's a lot of great things about this project. In addition to improving our infrastructure and improving safety, we also need to keep this island historic, and that's where our commission, the Historic District Commission, and other interested parties come in. It's not just us. We're not the only ones that are saying the island needs to be historic. I have the Long Range 2020 Transportation Plan here, which says the Nantucket community has done an excellent job of preserving historic structures, which has been enforced through the designation of the island as a historic district. However, there continues to be a need to recognize the defining elements of Nantucket's cultural landscape, facades, gardens, and open spaces, and how they relate to one another. The transportation system can assist in blending the prevalent historic character into areas that lack this influence. This can be accomplished with the strategy of using historic and walkable street pattern of interconnected streets with the use of paving materials and standards found in the more historic areas of the island. This can also be accomplished with early coordination with the Historic District Commission, which is charged with architectural review of structures, and the Historical Commission, which is charged with archaeological and historical resource preservation. So it's really part of what we do as a town, always, in everything that we do in our transportation plan, in our strategic plan, to think about our historic resources. We have prepared a short history of Milestone Road because I think there seems to be some question about the historic asset and whether or not it is a historic asset. Mary Bergman has prepared a short history of the road. It's one of the earliest roads that was formally laid out on Nantucket. Would it be helpful for the board to hear that, or for the public to hear that before we get into the specific recommendations?
Is it something that you could submit?
Sure. I mean, in summary, the road was laid out in 1824. So it's a really old road, and it actually has milestones on it. So as we think about this historic asset going forward, you know, perhaps this would have been an opportunity, or perhaps it still is an opportunity, to actually restore some of those historic aspects of the road. I think it would be really neat if cyclists could see the milestones, because we believe they are still there, but they're just hidden. So that's some of the history and the context that we could pull out of uniting transportation projects and historic preservation more closely. So thank you. So to get into the report, we are asking the select board to consider asking the Department of Transportation to make certain changes if possible at this point in the project. The first area would be the curbing. The curbing is hot mixed asphalt berm curbing. This curbing will be seen at, it is already seen at the bus turnouts, and we're not necessarily advocating that that be changed, but they are reconstructing certain intersections. Monomoy, Pulpus Road, Tom Nevers Road, and Nobodier Farm Road intersection will be reconstructed, and other minor side roads will have the intersections realigned with a bike path. These will all have hot mix asphalt curb, which is not something we really have or generally want to have on Nantucket. There is slanted granite curb all around Milestone Rotary. It's in, I think, 5 different places on side roads on Milestone Road, and it's currently slated to be removed from those places and replaced with asphalt berm. So our hope is that that's not such a big deal to swap out that hot mixed asphalt berm for slanted granite curbing, which would be more in keeping with what's already on the road with what we aspire to for Nantucket. So maybe now we can move on to the signs and some of the other features. Would it be possible to scroll down to the 2x2 chart? I think this is really a helpful way to visualize. I mean, it's not our job to decide if something is safe or not, or if something is a good transportation device or not. So, but we did feel, because we didn't have the opportunity, we didn't exist when the public hearings were happening, we didn't have the opportunity to have a dialogue about all of these things and develop a comprehensive plan that balanced safety and historic needs. We really had to take the safety priority into account when we thought about our recommendations to you. So we created this rubric to think about it, which is that there is a safety impact assigned by the road safety audit. They assigned every proposed change a safety impact from high to low. And then we, as the Historical Commission, considered the visual impact and the impact on the historic asset also from low to high. And then we graphed them on this 2x2 chart. So this is a quick way of thinking about all of these different elements and saying, all right, well, the things that are low with safety impact but high with visual impact are the ones that we want to look at possibly limiting or eliminating. The changes that are high safety impact and low visual impact would be the go zone. Those are really attractive. Of course, cost we didn't figure into. There is a cost element in the safety impact. The yellow zone are areas that have a high safety impact, but also a high visual impact, and that's where the consulting and the discussion should happen to come to some understanding of what's the right choice. So one thing that actually isn't in this chart that I really only became aware of and our commission only became aware of recently is the striping. So we were advised when we've been looking at this project since August. We were advised by the DPW that's what is typical on Nantucket is to use thermoplastic markings for things like this striping, like a stop line, or the markings on the road, like a shared use bike lane, and to use a water-based paint for road striping. So it always was in our understanding that this would have a water-based paint for the yellow striping down the middle. It's actually thermoplastic. That is in fact marked on the plans in really, really tiny print. We missed it, but we are currently having installed highly reflective thermoplastic double yellow and single broken yellow lines on Sconset Road. We probably would have had something to say about that because there's a long history about thinking about reflective surfaces on Nantucket, whether it's a plastic fence that's highly reflective in town or a sign. But I just wanted to note that that is another change on the road, that as we think about other roads, we should probably think about how we feel about these reflected lines. That being said, we are recommending that the Select Board request fewer signs on Sconset Road. So we thought about this kind of philosophically. First of all, if it was flagged in the report, the road safety audit, as being a low safety impact, we flagged it to be removed. We also looked at some legacy signs that seemed like they were just there and they're going to get upgraded, and those we flagged to be removed. There are broad categories. So there are 121 signs being proposed for the road. It's a 6.5 mile road. And there are, of course, there were already signs on the road. So net new signs is about 80. Some of the categories of the most signs are no passing signs. So we're going to have highly reflective yellow, double yellow lines, and then that will change to broken yellow line for passing. And every time a passing zone ends, there will be two facing you, one on each side of the road facing the driver, no passing, do not pass, yellow pennant 4 feet wide. So we think that these are redundant because you're going to have a really visible yellow line. Everyone's going to know what it means. We think there are many speed signs that could be removed, deer warning signs. I don't think I need to go through all of them because we actually put in, because we knew we were hoping to make this really easy for everybody to understand our recommendations, and if you agree with them, to forward them. So we listed a sign-by-sign review. But I do want to say that as far as safety goes, nearly 94% of the accidents happened at intersections. So we think the changes to the intersections, the trimming of brush that the DPW has been doing, the limiting of the no passing zones, these are going to have an enormous safety benefit for our community. And the additional signs are going to be visual clutter, and we recommend that they be removed. We also did have a question about why rumble strips were not considered. This is a low cost, high safety value, low visual impact change to the road. There were accidents from lane departures. I know we've all driven down the narrow road and felt like, oh, are we gonna stay on this road? And rumble strips have a great benefit. There's some concern about noise. They're about as noisy as an air conditioner. They only make the noise when you run over them. So we thought that was interesting. We also looked ahead to road widening. I don't know if you all want to have that conversation today because it's not part of this project. I know it has been approved in town meeting. At least some of the funds have been made available. It's the feeling on our commission that the narrowness of the road contributes to its distinctive character and that it's appropriate historically. I will say that the new yellow stripes that are thermoplastic, you know, the MUTCD, I think I'm getting all those letters right, guidelines call for 4-inch to 6-inch stripes. These are 6, you know, maybe 4-inch would have been more appropriate for a narrow road like this. But in general, our recommendation is to leave the road narrow, leave the road peaceful, and leave the road beautiful. I don't know if any of my commissioners have anything else to add. Yeah, so again, safety isn't our remit, but we did make the observation that cars speed up on wider roads, and maybe that should be considered as well, perhaps by the Traffic Safety Board. And I'm happy to take questions.
Question or or comment?
Yeah, just, well, first off, I'm very impressed with your first report from this commission. It was really well thought out and really well researched, and you guys are to be commended. I was really impressed. So, yeah.
And I do want to echo that. The presentation was very clear, so this was very helpful, I think, for us to be able to absorb the information quickly. So I also want to echo that. I know my question is more, I felt with the signs that the recommendations all made sense, and I would be in favor of accepting them unless public safety had any issues with the removals. And there was one that seemed more of a DPW issue about rubbish enforcement. So unless there were some concerns about those, I would be in favor of recommending them, accepting the recommendations.
Don's looking at me like, what do you think, Jason? I
Seeing who wants to talk.
I went through each one because I live in Tom Never, so I get to drive most of this a couple times a day. And I think most of them I agree with removing them, but not all. But I guess my question is who decides? And maybe it was what you said, Rita, that public safety and DPW, traffic safety review it. I do think that it's a lot of signs. We could go and do what Nantucketers usually do and just take them down after they go up. But there could be liability issues. We might take down the wrong ones. And so I think there'd be some kind of process, but I agree overall with removing a lot of them. But I also like to ask Libby or Chief or anybody, there's been other projects where we've taken down signs afterwards, after we saw like, okay, we really don't need X, Y, Z. It hasn't been this many.
I don't think
What's
it's
the
been
process?
this. I don't think it's been this many. But let's remember, this is a state road. This is not a town road. So we have limited ability to really change much of what the state is going to do with this road. I'm sure they are willing to listen to our concerns and comments, but I don't think we're going to have town staff review what signs should and should not stay. Okay. We can certainly send the list, if the board so desires, to the state and have them review it for safety purposes. And go from there on that and let them know, we are concerned about the visual clutter and the historic nature of the road and that sort of thing. But there's a potential liability issue if the town starts taking signs down from a state road.
I would be in favor of sending the recommendation to minimize the signs as suggested. And I think the other piece that we could recommend is reusing the granite curbing where it exists currently. I would imagine the state's not going to be willing to buy more, but if they could put back what's there, if they're realigning. I think that some of those intersections were actually required by the planning board to have the granite curbing. Am I right in that? I'm looking at Andrew. Like Sheep Commons or Milestone Crossing.
Yeah, I think at the main areas like the turnoffs and things, it should be granite. It's okay on the bus turnoffs and along the road if it's tar. But I think at the main places where people are slowing down, I think we should leave the recommendation in and keep it granite just for consistency. It shouldn't be granite some places and then tar everywhere else. I mean, you shouldn't mix it up.
Yeah, and I really don't agree with taking out granite and not putting it back in. If there's granite there, it should go back in. If it needs to be removed, it should be replaced as granite. And I'm okay with putting it as a recommendation. Again, I'm sure it has financial implications, and if there's areas that are designated asphalt. So I'm not necessarily in favor of insisting that we have granite everywhere, but I absolutely think that wherever we already have it, it should remain.
So it's not going to hurt to ask for all these things.
Sure.
Sorry.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I spoke with Rob today a little bit about it, and the state is funding the renovations, but then the town will be responsible for the upkeep, and that granite is a lot more difficult to upkeep and it's more permeable. And so just always thinking about that financial cost as we're making these recommendations, that going with the asphalt is kind of easier on the DPW staff, less resources on town.
And that's kind of what I was saying. If we, if the key areas like the Rotary and some of the turnoffs should be granite and the rest of it should be, could be tar, I think that's not an issue.
Isn't permeability a good thing, though, I would imagine?
For
I also-
recharge, yeah.
Yeah, I would argue, but if we go down that road, that granite would have a lot longer lifespan than asphalt, so the asphalt will need to get repaired. But I think at least from a consistency point of view, and at this stage of the game, I think that having this review is valuable and making the requests, just not getting rid of any granite that we already have. And then if we can have some consistency in where we put it in, that would be ideal.
The only other recommendation I think I heard was the stripes, the thermoplastic stripes. You know, I wouldn't mind seeing them 4 inches because there's not enough room on that road as it is. So if they're making them 6 and pushing everybody, 4 more inches, apart, that's one thing. The road widening, I agree and I said this at MPDC, I think it should stay thin from New South Road to Sconset. But I think because of the traffic out to New South, that probably would be okay to have that wider. It's just past the airport. But I think once you get past the airport, I think that next stretch could be thin and remain that way. And I think that I've said that at NPDC, I think that would be a pretty good compromise in that regard. And I think that should be in there to the state, that we don't want to widen the road. And it is part of the letter, so.
But it's not part
I'm
of
not
this
sure
project.
that I agree with not widening that road. I've lived in Tom Nevers, and if you drive on that road in a rainstorm, it's really scary. There isn't just the water does not get it. You can't get out of the way, and the Vesper Lane is 24 feet wide. Milestone is 21 feet wide, and everyone is going much faster. I don't think that there's the breathing room, and I think that once it's done, you're not going to know the difference. I don't know. I mean, we're not talking about a lot of area to add, but I think it would make a big difference in the safety of it with the vehicles passing and going up to 45 miles an hour.
Some of that, I think some of the water issues are drainage though too. So if you do it and you don't drain it properly.
May be able to be fixed with the better sloping and shoulders, but something should be done safety-wise on that road. That's just my opinion.
Just so everyone knows where I stand, I think asking the Mass DOT to take down as many of these signs in this report and see if they do it or not. So I'm for that. Trying to I agree with Rita, keeping all the granite that's already there and seeing what they ask or what they come back with. And then, but I have no problem with the reflective thermal plastic. It'll stay longer. That's just my opinion, and I'm for the widening. But I think it's because I drive it every day, and kind of some of the things that you said. And if we only do it to New South Road, that's fine. That's at least a little better.
But the widening is actually not part of this project
Right.
anyway, so we don't really have to have that debate right now.
Right.
Did you have a follow-up comment?
Well, I just wondered, there are people from Sconset and people here. I don't know if you had time to hear any comments from the audience or if anybody wanted to make a comment, but someone said something to me, so I wanted to mention it.
Is there something that people wanted to add as a comment, or do you are just in agreement with the report? I mean, anyone's also certainly welcome to email us at any time.
I'm Georgia Raisman. I live in Sconset. I really want to add this more as an individual, but I did spend a lot of time with that road safety audit. And I had a lot of opinions about it, one of which is characterizing things as crashes, which in fact seemed to me to be not much more than fender benders. If you looked at the fact that there were 65 of them over a 7-year period, so that's like less than 10 a year, and of those 65, 3 of them resulted in incapacitating injuries. So we're not talking about a road on which there's a lot of dangerous accidents happening. And I think that has to be considered, because when you consider all of the numbers that they gave us, almost 80% of these fender benders or accidents, nobody got hurt by. So there were car injuries. And the ones that actually related to the kinds of signs they want to put up were even smaller than that. The ones that related to no passing were something like 3 or 6 out of those 65. And after that, they proposed that we should put up all of these signs relating to pedestrians crossing and bicyclists crossing, none of which have to do with passing roads, passing cars. So it seemed to me like they were identifying problem A and proposing solution B. And the result of that was going to be we're going to get 80 new signs on a beautiful rural road. And it just doesn't follow to me. So I think that the safety issues are very small, and the consequence of littering our landscape are very high. So under those circumstances, I think the town has almost an obligation to take a more aggressive stance with the state. I understand it's a state road, but there were only 2 town people on this whole traffic commission, and I think they weren't really focusing on the aesthetic elements of that road. But if you look at the actual incidents, the statistics do not support 80 new signs on a rural road. And I would really like the town to.
I think we all agree with
Well,
with
then
that.
I think if we agree on that, the town sort of has an obligation to do something and not just say, well, it's a state road, let's see if they agree or not. I think we could take a more proactive attitude towards it. Thank you.
That's how it works.
Yes. Hi.
Sorry, I'd like to speak. I'm a Summer Sconset resident. My name's Gail Walker. And I feel like the safety problem with Milestone Road is really a lack of enforcement of the speed limit. I think all these improvements with the T intersections and everything's going to help a lot, but I still think it's going to be an unsafe road as long as people are allowed to exceed the 45-mile-per-hour speed limit. And I know there's a lack of resources, and I don't know in terms of enforcement whether it's state officers who enforce that speed limit on that section or whether it's Nantucket police. But I know in Sconset generally we have a speeding problem, and trying to get the speed limit enforced there has been a problem because of lack of resources, which I understand. So I'm going to propose something that may be controversial, but when I'm not here, I live in Washington, D.C., and D.C. uses speed cameras because of lack of resources in enforcing the speed limit, and that has solved a lot of problems, and a lot of other municipalities do that too. When you don't have the manpower, you use technology to help you. So I don't understand how all the bureaucracy works and who gets to decide what in Nantucket, but I just wanted to point that out. I think adding lots of speed limit signs isn't going to make people go slower as long as it's not enforced. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, I don't think there's any disagreement over there being too many signs proposed, and we will send this up to the state. Oh,
Yeah, I just have a quick comment because I've been thinking about this in terms of it being considered more of a state highway, right? So it's getting all of these bright, shiny signs and upgrades. And I was thinking, you know, I come from Vermont. We have a lot of rural roads that are designated as historic byways or scenic byways. And I would like to see if the town or the state could start thinking about the road in that way. And I think in that way you can have fewer signs and, you know, less reflectivity if that's an issue. But I was sort of thinking that because it really, all of our roads here, whether they're a state or not, really are very scenic as you drive out them if you know, don't go 50 miles an hour down Milestone Road or what have you. But so that was really sort of the only thing I had to say, because I'm obviously in agreement. I know I had one other thing on the signs, I'm trying to find it up there. Oh, the trucks ahead or pedestrians ahead, right? So I get the pedestrian warning thing, but I was thinking it'd be more helpful if there was an actual distance that went with that, like 100 feet ahead or 100 feet or however many meters or something that actually gave someone an idea of how far ahead, because ahead can be a long way or a short way. So that was my only thought on maybe improving that, the little sign that says ahead and put some detail. Thank you.
thank you.
Madam
One more.
Chair, one before Nat gets on, the one thing I just want to throw in there, like we are trying to get people to walk more and bike more. It's a big part of our strategic plan. There might have to be some signs to make it safer. Not all of the 1,000 that the state's providing, but just in general. I just want to keep what else we're trying to get people to do. We have to keep it safe for them.
A question before I forget, is there a scenic road designation? And if we did, will we require like 20 of those big blue signs to tell us it's a scenic road? I mean, I don't know if there is a scenic road designation or not. Andrew could.
We
you
do
know if-
not need any scenic view signs.
No, but that's what I'm worried. I wouldn't want to be a scenic road if they made signs to it all the way around the island.
Mass General Law, Chapter 40, Section 15C is scenic road designations. State roads cannot be designated as scenic under that statute.
Okay.
They're issued, a historic commission or a planning board can propose those. They go to town meeting for a vote. And there are no scenic roads designated on Nantucket.
Okay, thanks.
Nat Lowell, Planning Commission Chair. I'm here to get everyone back down off the ceiling on this. So you can blame me for this. 4 years ago, I got a phone call from Charlie O'Neill telling me that we got to do something about passing. And I said, I'd love to ban passing and leaf blowers. And so we put it on the Traffic Safety Committee agenda to look at Sconset Road to double line it at least to Bean Hill. So once that went through that process, there was no agreement at Traffic Safety to make it all the way to Sconset double line. So it went to the state back then. This is over 3 years ago, and all this stuff that happens with the state, they come down and they get their little markers out and they start looking at things, and all of a sudden they're looking at the bus stuff. And this is how this stuff happens. You can shake your head all you want. That's how it happens, sir. Okay? The state, we had an opportunity to take this road. How many years ago was that, Libby? 10? We had some kind of thing happened about 10 years ago. And of course, we get all nervous because we suddenly have no money. 5 minutes later, we have plenty. It depends on what you're talking about. So this is what we're stuck with. Okay? So when this road was paved in 2009, you remember that? I went out there with my tape measure while it was being done, talked to Victor, talked to the state guy, talked to the cops that were doing the traffic. I said, this isn't wide enough. This should be 22 feet travel way with slope retainment on the edges. And what happened? It all broke apart. It's all broken apart. You can't say that it's not broken apart, because then that means that you're just making it up, because it's all broken apart, because the road is too narrow. Okay? There's a stretch of Nantucket Road after the Barrett Farm Road entrance around the bend, and it stops. That was almost like a test spot. Okay, I sent a bunch of emails out about this to a few people that hopefully sent it to some more, because I'm never going to be on Facebook. And it's about 22 and a half, 23 feet travel way. I think everybody goes to the dump on Nantucket, and no one's ever complained about that one stretch of road. That's what Sconset Road should be like. But it's not going to be. So everybody can be happy that it's going to be too narrow, except to New South. And when that happens, hopefully, whenever that is, because that's not part of this project, as Don said, it's only getting widened to New South, as Matt indicated, okay? So, you know, it's just unfortunate, because we could have had our bike path widened. The bike path's only 8 feet on Sconset Road. Every bike path since Eel Point is 10 feet wide, except the mutt path on Prospect. It's all 10 feet now as a standard width. I think it should be 12, because we got all these new electric things coming. I mean, you'd be surprised what's going to be on that bike path the next couple of years. So that would be something new to complain about. So anyway, so the sign issue, nobody disagrees with that. We had these crazy signs in 2007. We built the first and only roundabout that actually works on Nantucket at the post office. The signs came down within like a week. Okay? Remember the little metal thing that was sticking up and somebody had to go take a Sawzall and cut it off? That was 12 years ago. The signs that were up that everybody was complaining about in May are already in somebody's basement. Okay? Historically put in someone's basement. So the angle curve, and I want to get to that for a second. I know, but this is important, because all this stuff, there's more people in this audience for this one thing than came to all the planning commission meetings for 3 years about this, okay? Except for Mary Longacre. She comes to our meetings. So the angle curve, and there's five spots where they have the angled curve, and it's not in cement. It's just laid at an angle in the ground, okay? That was just the choice of whether it was a planning board decision for Milestone Crossing and to Tadakimo. The golf course has it as well. there's one more I noticed the other day. There's a total of 5. I forgot the other one right now. I'll think of it when I'm done. And I asked Mike Burns about this the other day, and according to the plan, it does not say they're removing them completely. They're widening part of the bike path to 10 feet, just where it touches it. So they're going to have to cut out a little bit of that curbing to make the bike path part. But as far as the plans show, according to him, they're not removing it. I think we should have that anywhere that makes sense. It's not a question of one being better than the other in the sense of maintenance. There's no maintenance with granite curbing. Asphalt berm is good when it's not driven over, okay? So, this is complicated in the sense of like when you hear these things, you think that everything is coming to an end. The stuff is not going away as far as we know. The rumble strip issue, that's for when people fall asleep at the wheel on the highways. I don't know. I've never heard that mentioned on the Nantucket before. As far as the things you see out there for the lines, that's temporary. They just put stickers down. That's not the road line that's going to be there. That's not what's happening. So I don't know how that all came up. It's going to be? Well, they're going to have cat's eyes. That's why they had to grind it out. All right. Okay. Well, maybe we could ask for the paint. But they're putting the reason they had to grind the center line out, because I had that question asked to me at least a dozen times. I had to call up and find out because I didn't really know. I was assuming it was because of the cat's eye things. That's what it was. Because they were put in the spot that they're not going to be in when they put the double lines in. So this is what it takes to get no passing to Bean Hill. Thank you.
Last person.
Hi, Judy Zerheide. I just wanted to comment to your safety issue. I asked Chief Murphy how wide the fire trucks are, and he said they're 12 feet with their mirrors. So if you have 2 vehicles passing, similar vehicles passing, and did I hear mention that the roads were 21 feet wide? Something to look at, consider. Thank you.
Okay, so did you have a
I just wanted to confirm a couple things while we're here. So currently, although it's not part of this project, we're only widening to New South Road. That's the only discussion there. And then what we're doing is sending a request to accept these recommendations to the state for these sign removals. A comment on the granite curbing. And that's where we're at. Okay, I just wanted to make sure.
So is that a motion? Did you want it to be a motion?
Just clarification on the granite curbing. Keep it where it already is. Yes?
Correct. Other than minor modifications, if what Nat is saying is that there's minor modifications for the bike path, but that it should be kept intact where it is otherwise.
I think can we just send forward the recommendations from the Historical Commission? Can that be the motion? That's basically what it says. I'll make that as a motion if that's not what is your intent to send what their recommendations?
I think I suppose I don't want the signs to get lost in the recommendations. I agree with them on the granite curbing, but the sign recommendations would be the most important. So as long as the other recommendations wouldn't lessen the request on the signs, I would be fine with sending as is.
So the question becomes, who's going to rewrite it? If we rewrite it, are we rewriting the recommendation and make sure it goes to the right places, et cetera?
And just to double check as well, do these recommendations have anything about the thermoplastic lines? I don't remember reading that.
Can I say something about that? We would need to double check this, but thermoplastic lines on state and federal roads, I believe, are a requirement. It's a safety requirement. We have fog issues. We already have people who complain that the paint rubs out very quickly. So there is a reason to have it. If you want us to ask the state not to turn thermoplastic down and have paint, we're going to be doing a lot of painting. And we already can't do it.
I'm not in favor of asking them to take out the thermoplastic or the rumble strips or the road widening. I am completely supportive of getting less signs and of reusing the granite curbing. I can't, I'm not on board with the rest.
And I think the report has more than what you just said. So I think we have to have a different version of it or a different ask than just the report.
We'd be happy to work on with you to get there. So just to clarify, the road will have reflectors. So there will be 2 directional cat eye reflectors. And, you know, the spirit of the 106 review is that it's a conversation. This would be a conversation with the DOT. You know, they would probably give us feedback, discuss it with us. So if it's possible, we could just have when I say we, I mean anyone. It doesn't have to be me or the commission. Enter into that discussion and get that feedback. The recommendations would go to a certain person whose name I have. It's District 5 DOT, and we can help with all of that. And also, there are no rumble strips. I just was a little confused. You know, there are no rumble strips going in.
Right, no, but it was
in the
but
report.
you recommended
Yeah.
it as an alternative. I think that whatever goes to the state should come through town administration. Is highly important. And I don't know if we send the full report and then send a follow-up comment from us of what parts we're particularly concerned with. I'm looking for direction.
Well, I would look to Andrew to see what the general protocol is here, but it would seem to me that we could certainly send the report as an addendum, but what I think you would probably say is that the Historical Commission has commented, we've discussed it at a public meeting, and of the recommendations contained in the report, the board supports the signage recommendation, which basically is to remove as much as possible that is not safety related, and to retain the granite curbing where it already is now, if I understood what you all said correctly.
Those are 2 I would definitely support. I feel like at this point, to be honest, I don't have enough information on the thermoplastic and the cat's eyes. So I wouldn't be in favor of making that recommendation at this stage.
And I look at this, if it's a conversation, then who has the conversation? You know, we're making this, if we're doing what we're doing now, we're just taking a bunch of recommendations and peeling off a couple because, you know, people live in Tom Nevers and people don't like this and people don't like that. And then we're doing, and what I'm saying is if you're having a review, then the review, then the conversation happens and you see what actually is possible. Whereas if we're negotiating against ourselves in a way by giving stuff up right away.
Well, that's why I think the whole report should go, but we would weigh in a separate letter saying that these are the things that we're fully.
Yeah, and that I'm fine with.
Concerned with.
That if we send the whole report with a letter saying we support these things the strongest, then that's fine.
Yeah, I mean, I thought the report was really thorough and really good, and the state can comment as they're willing to do.
If the 106 is a conversation, then Hillary and other members of the NHC can really get into detail about cat's eyes and reflect with the state, right? Just on their own, doing their own research.
Well, but it has to be. We have to give them the blessing to be able to go do that. We have to bless that conversation. And what I'm hearing is we aren't blessing some of those conversations.
Well, I think,
would people go for a 4-inch instead of a 6-inch, thermoplastic line?
is that something we can add to the letter where we support the curbing recommendation and the sign removal, and simply that there was a further question looking for feedback on the cat's eyes versus the lined painting, and just include that in our letter and ask for that conversation to be continued.
And that there were some other concerns with things that are not part of this project included in the report, if they could comment back on their reasoning. I'll get to you right after we finish the motion. Is that a motion?
I'll make that a motion. Send the full report, pull out the 2 that we agree on this evening, and then ask for feedback on the additional recommendations that were made. including the thermoplastic versus line painting.
Or thinner lines,
Thinner,
yeah.
yeah.
I'll second that then.
Okay, all those in favor?
All right.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, motion carries unanimously.
Hi, Lucy Dillon. I was going to ask or recommend that the Historic Commission would be able to see any information that was sent to the DOT about this before.
Oh, of course.
Oh, okay. I just didn't want something created and then not let the Historic Commission review it before it's sent off. Thank you.
Review our letter?
Yeah,
Yeah,
okay, thank you.
it'll be,
So I can see what's going to happen here. We're going to prepare a letter. They're going to review it. Maybe they'll be okay with it, and maybe they won't. So now we're going to have a back and forth that's going to last some period of time before we actually get this letter out. I'm happy to send it to them for some amount of review, and if it's a doable, simple, not intent changing changes, that's fine. But I've got a lot of other things to work on besides a letter about this.
I don't think that there needs to be a subcommittee meeting on our letter if it's in regard to what we've just talked about, but we will provide copies
Yeah,
to
I think
the
it's copies.
Historical Commission. And if there's something pressing that they need to send back, I don't think that there will be time to set up a meeting to discuss it.
Right,
No,
I'm happy to
I don't think
send-
it's necessary. I
Yeah.
think we're all on the same page.
I'm happy to send Hillary a draft, but I'm not going to be able to go around and around about what it ultimately says.
I think Rita's motion was good because it puts in there, like, we also want to continue the conversation on everything else, right, with the state and NHC. So I think it's not an end point.
Right. But yeah, I don't think having it on another agenda item for us would be very effective at this stage either. So I'm happy with sending a draft to the chair, sending it off, and if there's any issues going forward, we can deal with it then.
That sound good? 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 Okay.
Can I just make one
Thank
last
you.
comment about it? Just today, Don was presenting at the Rotary Club about our strategic plan, and our aspirational statement about quality of life ends with, "The island has maintained its strong rural identity and well-preserved historic character." So I just wanted to thank the commission for all the work that they've done, and you're in line with our strategic plan. So thank you.
Okay. We have a report from the Coastal Resiliency Advisory Committee. Oh, and we will circulate the history of Milestone Road.
Good evening. Everybody here okay? Thank you very much. So, good evening, first of all, and thank you for bringing me to give an update on the Coast Resiliency Advisory Committee and the meetings that we've had to date, that the committee has had to date. We have had 4 meetings. The first was simply to bring the committee together and elect their officer positions, which were Mary Longacre, who's present here in the room and can answer questions if needs be. She is the chair. Peter Brace was elected as the vice chair, and Fritz McClure was elected as the secretary. They had a good discussion on the first day, got the brief from the select board, and the next meeting after that was the 3rd of September. One of the main points at that meeting was to develop a mission statement, which there was quite a lot of conversation on, and then they just also worked on 30-day and end-of-year goals. Some of the 30-day goals were fairly simple and straightforward. They wanted to understand a lot of the information that was out there and to try and get some more resources. So one of the ways to address that for the committee was to create a resources library, and that ended up taking the form of a lot of documents that were quite centered on Nantucket and other pertinent documents from Massachusetts as well, that pointed out climate change issues and sea level rise issues. So this is now available to that committee. It now comprises something like 35 different documents. That met some of the 30-day goals. At the next meeting on the 17th of September, they approved, they made minor alterations to and approved their mission statement. And if you would be so willing to hear it, it is: the committee will work with the Coast Resiliency Coordinator in the development, oversight and implementation of the Coast Resilience Plan for the town of Nantucket, and to address the impacts of climate change and sea level rise. The plan shall address planning across the system-wide needs of the community and includes social, cultural and economic needs, infrastructure needs and the needs of the natural environment. The preservation of historic landmarks shall also be a component of the plan. So that was the final and agreed upon mission statement, and that's now also on the committee's website, on the town website, on the committee's page. We also had a few presentations that day. So the last two meetings, yesterday and the previous meeting, was largely about a lot of presentations to get the committee up to speed. Some are experts, but not all. So wanted everyone to be on the same page as to where resources are within the town, what we have, what plans have been put in place, and what plans need to be completed. Then, on yesterday's meeting, we had two more presentations. The first was from Holly Backus, and that was on the Massachusetts Historic Preservation Conference that she attended, and she gave a fantastic presentation of all the issues and topics that were discussed there. I gave another presentation again at the meeting on October 1st, and the purpose of that was to outline absolutely every method that I could find for coastal resiliency. The purpose of that was you need to know all of the methods that are out there and available, whether and how they might be implemented on Nantucket, and whether they're first of all viable or not. Some methods just may not be viable here, but you still have to know about it in order to consider it. The purpose of all of this was to get everyone up to speed, and now the committee can get to the point where they can now look at specific sites, specific locations, and work on specific infrastructure ideas so that to make coastal areas more resilient. That's the bulk of what has happened so far. There are, at the next meeting, which is scheduled for the 15th, we'll start focusing on some more information, but also we should start moving towards what information might be included in an RFP for a coastal resilience plan, which is the ultimate deliverable for the Coastal Resilience Advisory Committee. There you go. Any questions?
I just had a question about how this sort of adding on to the initial coastal resiliency plan that we had that has been prepared over the last year. I don't know if we have the final plan of that. Is this sort of taking that and building on, filling in the gaps?
The one prepared by Malone and McBroom?
Yes. Yeah.
So that is still in review, and that's not finished yet. And that coastal resilience document isn't necessarily a plan as such. It's more of a strategy and possibilities rather than an actual plan of what might be implemented at locations. That's not a component of it.
Okay. And then the deliverable for this committee, which is that plan, is that what is going to give the town guidance when we're looking at what to do in historic downtown, what to do in Sconset and Nantucket in terms of options for controlling erosion or dealing with sea level rise? Mm-hmm. Is that the plan that will then give us recommendations for each area?
So there will be effectively two plans, one which will be more focused on the coastal areas, which is the plan that I'm initially talking about and referring to. There will be a secondary plan under the Resilient Nantucket header, which will focus on the preservation of historic buildings. Hopefully those two plans can be developed somewhat in tandem so that it will cover everything. But the primary focus of the Coastal Resiliency Advisory Committee will be more or less the coastal areas It doesn't have a historic component, and we always have to think in that area, but it will be more or less the coastal zones. And also taking stormwater and floodwater into account as well.
Thank you.
Thank you so
Thanks,
much.
Vincent.
Town managers report.
Not to go back, but I didn't know if the chair wanted to say anything. Mary, wanted to say anything? Did you, Mary, want to say anything about the committee, or was Vince covering it? I just didn't know.
I think the only thing that I wanted to add, so I'm Mary Longacre, Chair of the Coastal Resilience Advisory Committee. The members of the committee were very enthusiastic about meeting this charge and decided to meet twice a month because we felt that there was a lot of ground to cover and we had a sense of urgency. So I just wanted to let people know that yes, we do take this quite strongly as something that needs to be done. Thank you for the opportunity to do it.
Thank you for putting in the time.
Okay, town manager's report. We've got a follow-up report on a public comment item that was made at the board's September 18th meeting. There's a report in your packet, and the Natural Resources Director is going to take us through it.
Good evening, everyone. Jeff Carlson, Natural Resources Director again. Following up on Mr. Bender's public comments last meeting about the Salem Street or Stop and Shop parking lot, I'll just kind of summarize to date. We had received a similar complaint before in 2017 and had followed up with them at that point. And the report kind of speaks for itself in the sense that the site was brought back into complete compliance. All of the catch basins were pumped and cleaned. All of the sorbent pillows were installed. Since Mr. Bender's comment, the Conservation Commission, as directed through the Chapter 91 license, has requested all of the maintenance logs and inspection logs that they're able to ask for from the time period from 2017 to current. They have time to put that together, so we're hopefully going to have that for our next meeting next week for what that would be. And again, if it's not in compliance, we can report that to Waterways, and the commission can compel them into compliance again. So I think that's kind of the step that we're at. The commission at the last meeting also authorized staff to kind of follow up with them every 2 months to be sure that they're doing it for a period of time until they get in the habit of reporting or doing inspections if they're missing any. They followed up very quickly the first time this was raised to them in 2017. So we'd anticipate that they would deal with any issues relatively quickly again and address them pretty thoroughly. So I'm happy to take any questions. We'll go from there.
I'm just, how often are they supposed to be doing this maintenance?
So it depends on the inspections. They're supposed to be inspecting the sorbent pillows at least every 2 months. And then the catch basins kind of on an every 6 month basis. We did do kind of a physical inspection of all of them. There are a couple that seem to be okay and a couple that are definitely need to be cleaned out again. So hopefully that will be addressed in this kind of cycle with them. But then again, I think it's just more establishing just the habit of doing it as they're supposed to be doing.
In terms of the Conservation Commission and enforcement issues, is it complaint-driven? It seems like if this one was a complaint-driven in 2017 and again now in 2019, does the CONCOM have a way to keep up to date on these enforcement issues, or is it more of complaint-driven?
Sorry to interrupt, but this one's kind of unique in the sense that the issue that's at hand isn't necessarily a Wetlands Protection Act issue. This is an authority specifically designated through the Chapter 91 license to the CONCOM to be a reporting authority to Waterways and to kind of be their eyes and ears for this specific system. So it functions a little differently where we're not necessarily issuing out a formal enforcement action through the WPA to order them into compliance with the Wetlands Protection Act. This is more of a, we want your logs, and then if we aren't satisfied with those, we report those to Waterways, who hold the license and hold all the enforcing authority. So it's weird to say, but we're kind of middlemaning the compliance in this. Every time we've asked for them before, we kind of follow up with we're going to report this to Waterways unless we can get it into compliance, and then it's come into compliance the last time that this was brought forward.
So in theory, we should just be asking for them more regularly, and that's
Right.
the habit you're saying. You're hoping
Correct.
to
So
build.
that's something that the commission has authorized us to do, is to just kind of follow up with them every 2 months for just their inspection report on the absorbent pillows that are there. And I think we're happy to do that. That's a simple check-in with whichever contact they're preferring at the time.
One more question. Is there anyone else with a similar requirement on the Chapter 91 license?
Yes and no. Chapter 91 licenses are all a little bit unique for time and place. There's none that necessarily designate this reporting authority to the Conservation Commission specifically. A lot of them are to either other agencies or through waterways themselves. There are a few other ones, but again, it's not something that's typically done.
Do you think they should be? How important are these in terms of maintaining harbor quality?
Well, that's a lot bigger question. I think for us, we see with a lot of these state regulations, whether it's Chapter 91 or herbicides and pesticides or other things that are regulated through the state, that we don't often get the same level of inspection or compliance that you sometimes see on the mainland just from resource issues and shortages. The last time we had a kind of a wholesale Chapter 91 inspection, we were well over kind of 6 to 8 issues that were ongoing, and the state came down at that point. I wish we had some more tools to be able to help with this a bit, and then kind of one at a time. They don't ever seem to happen all at the same time. They're spread out over a period of time. A lot of these issues sometimes as properties transfer requirements of 91 licenses are forgotten. Some signs come down, they disappear. Most of the time with some contact from the town, people usually put the sign back or deal with it. I think a positive example, we had an issue with the Dreamland Theater and their bathrooms. Then that issue has seemed to have been resolved just by contact with them saying, we know you're not in compliance. We'd like you to be in compliance, and if you are, then we won't have to report you. But it's also a very awkward position to kind of be the tattletale. So it'd be much nicer to have a little bit more local control and to regulate some of those public access conditions here.
I look at that. I don't think we can count on the state to protect our waters, et cetera. They're not going to be out here. They're not going to do it. That's, why we have the resource department, and we've got, that's why we have the responsibility. And it's not, some of this, like Jeff said, isn't the Concom's responsibility. This is the Natural Resource Department. So having this having it on a spreadsheet and knowing what has to be done when and making sure it's done is something you're working on. He and I have talked about Chapter 91 and they're working on it. That's what has to happen. And, and we shouldn't have to, and it isn't, enforcing isn't tattletaling. It's human nature not to want to have to be that guy, because I have to do it all day with my employees too, and it stinks sometimes. But it's human nature to want someone else to do the hard work. But the enforcement, it's critical, and you agree with that.
No, I'll clarify that the tattletaling is we're telling someone else to do something instead of just doing it ourselves. It's much simpler just to have that direct contact.
Yeah, and I think that we have, as a town, need to figure out how to do that, how to track all this stuff and do it. Because if you don't, eventually it sort of falls aside. And how many times between 2017 and 2019 did we ask for a report, and how many times did we receive a report? Yeah. So if we didn't ask, we're not going to get it. And a lot of these things from the even the wetlands, you don't just build a wetland and then it's wonderful and you leave it. We built wetlands to help, filter the pollution. Well, you have every so many years, you have to dig it out and redo it, or it's no good. It's the same thing. Like these catch basins, they're wonderful. Oh, it's great. We have pillows and everything else. But if you don't have them serviced, all you're doing is digging a 15-foot hole and putting the pollution closer to the to the water table. If they're not taken care of, if they're not, regularly maintained, you're just making it worse, not better. You'd be better off with a dirt parking lot. And so so some of this, the technology, we like to think technology will solve everything. It will if it's maintained and taken care of. And so I think we have, I think Steve was, I think the town is fortunate that he stayed honest on this. I know he's like a dog with a bone. And he might have a bit of a bark to him, but his point here is a really good one. And, you know,
I agree, and I think this is also something that kind of the townwide stormwater policy is also something we're hoping to address through the regulations being developed, because right now we don't really have a lot of regulations that deal with issues specific to this and dealing with it, and having some more tools for us locally to cut out these being just the only requirements on this system would be nice, because as far as I know, this is the only system licensed by Chapter 91 that we're doing any kind of inspection on or dealing with it, and having that local control, I think, is important.
right. But there are others that are outside of the Chapter 91 area,
Absolutely.
and they're just as important. If they're over the, you know, if it's a parking lot in the Mid-Island or a parking lot over the, you know, over the water table, we should be doing the same thing. And so when these happen, somehow they have to go onto a sheet and, you know, come up every month and be dealt with. Otherwise, it, you know, and it's expensive to do it. I've talked to people who've had to install them. It's expensive to have the stuff taken to the right place and dealt with properly. So the incentive really for the owner of the system is to leave it there and ignore it. You know, the incentive isn't to do the right thing with it. So unless we actually go out and have, you know, have inspections and know when they're supposed to be inspected, it isn't going to happen, you know. The interesting thing that I learned from Jeff about Chapter 91 is that it's all up in Boston. It's all written on cards. It's not, you know, so figuring out what people are supposed to do, like we've got this one Chapter 91 license to look at, but, you know, how many more do we have? What do they say? I don't know. I'm not sure we even know. And that's...
It's a good question. We're kind of relying upon the records that we keep. We just are relying upon the registry of deeds for those who have been recorded, but there are definitely plenty that have never been recorded. If anyone's ever had the chance to go to the Waterways office in Boston, they have a really interesting map, and it's like they get the guys that write your name on rice in the mall to write the numbers on the map, and it's really difficult to read, and they have very selective times you can get the records, and it's a system that is supposed to have been coming online for people to review just through the internet for the last like 10 years, and it still hasn't happened. So hopefully someday that will make it a little easier.
One of my suggestions in dreams is that WPI take that on and digitize that for us and have some students spend their work here doing that, because there's no way that you're going to be able to do it with yourself or with your staff. It just isn't going to happen. But if we
We're
could get
pretty
some
close.
horsepower.
We have all the ones that are recorded, and we keep
Right.
good records on those. So
Yeah.
it's the unrecorded ones that we don't know about that are
That's
floating
my
around.
point, yeah.
I did have actually one question you reminded me. In the license, some of the items said believed to be unlicensed. What was that? How is something, when it says who believes that something is unlicensed, versus it was in the Chapter 91, there was a whole list of,
Yeah.
looks like this.
Yes.
And it says license, and it has all the addresses, and then it says under license, believed unlicensed, and then some said unlicensed.
Sure. So there's a couple different issues. So Chapter 91 is dealing with essentially a couple of different areas. So the primary ones you have are navigable waterways, flow tidelands, filled tidelands. So a lot of these areas are historically in filled tidelands. So a lot of them, like North Wharf, Straight Wharf, Commercial Wharf, a lot of that is a filled tideland. And a lot of those structures would have required a license to be constructed, because it's constructed on filled tidelands. And the idea behind Chapter 91 is to provide some level of public compensation or public access for constructing on what at one point was lands of the Commonwealth, is open water or those areas. So there are a lot of structures, especially on Nantucket, where we have very historic structures that were never licensed, and it wasn't a program that was pursued. And there's been a couple separate amnesty windows where they've come in. There have been some projects like this that have included areas that they have these believed to have been licensed because at some point that area had a license for certain structures, but it may not be the existing structures. And then they also have unlicensed structures that were there before that sometimes get picked up in these new ones or licensed separately. But it is something where, we're always, especially as people initiate work through the Conservation Commission and it goes to DEP, seeing that a lot of these structures in these areas that are usually on filled tidelands are not licensed. So there's a large area on Easton Street, a lot of downtown. Like I said, the Dreamland Theater has a Chapter 91 license that people have never realized that it's required, and Waterways isn't sending out letters saying, hey, you need a license, get in touch with us. It's kind of come up on a case-by-case basis.
And a lot of them predate even the licensing. A lot of the houses on Easton Street, down by Brant Point, even on the wharf, they were all there before all this was even sort of state law.
Yeah, it's hard to do because the enactment date of Chapter 91 goes back to 1893. So we have some that do predate in our historic community, but it's very rare when people can come back and say, oh, I predate the regulation because it's so old.
Yeah. Well, I think I agree with Matt that having Mr. Bender bring it up was important, and I'm hoping through the stormwater regulations we can avoid sort of relying on general public bringing it to our attention. And I would agree with Matt as well that if there's any additional resources that helps us maneuver around Waterways' somewhat archaic system to be able to identify the drains within Chapter 91 and without Chapter 91 that would have high impact on water quality, I think that would be ideal.
I 100% agree.
Thanks.
All right. Thank you, guys.
Jeff.
Thanks.
Okay, fiscal 2021 general fund capital projects review. So this is general fund, it is not enterprise funds. And this is coming to you, we are trying to get more of a regular update about where we are with general fund and enterprise fund, but not tonight, capital projects reviews, so that we don't get to the end of the capital program committee's review process and the board has no idea what projects are. So your rep on the Capcom is Jason, and he's probably actually been to more Capcom meetings than I have to date, but I wanted to begin with a review of the process and then talk about a little bit of some of the projects that are likely to be coming up. We have a couple of people from Capcom, FinCom, and Select Board and staff that have been meeting from time to time to check in, make sure those boards are all in the loop about upcoming projects that are being reviewed. So quick overview of the process. Earlier this year in the spring, we had some meetings, or at least one, maybe more, I can't remember, with Capcom to review prior year capital projects. That sort of lays the groundwork for the upcoming year and potential changes to the capital improvement plan that may be coming in the upcoming fiscal year. Over the summer, instructions were sent out to the departments to update the CIP with anything that they have not previously submitted, and these would be mostly unusual items that haven't been known of or that have come up more recently than what's already in the plan. We had meetings with the Capcom as to potential new projects. We met with them about the sewer master plan, where we had some other meetings with them about scheduling and types of criteria to review with respect to the projects. We've met with almost all of the departments to review their fiscal 21 proposals, and the Capcom has established its review timeline. The Capcom now is meeting with departments, and as I mentioned, next slide, please. We're looking at regular status updates to the board and FinCom. Over the winter, FinCom and the Select Board will be reviewing the Capcom recommendations, and ultimately the FinCom will have recommendations to warrant articles for the 2020 annual town meeting. So this is a kind of a high-level overview. Next. Thank you. Of projects that are already in the capital improvement plan of $1 million or more. So we've got our annual roadway maintenance appropriation that is at least $1 million, if not more. We have what is likely to be phase 2 of the Surfside Area Roads project. As you know, the boulevard has been done. As you know, we combined Monahans, Orkawa, and Lovers Lane into one article at last year's town meeting and election. That did not ultimately pass, so we are going to break that project into phases, and I believe the next phase will be Lovers Lane. That is at least $1 million, if not more. The Newtown road improvements we've talked about, again, that's broken out from a project that was bundled last year with the roundabout at Fairgrounds and Old South and some other roadway improvements in the area. That's just over $1 million. We've got some improvements to the Fairgrounds area roads, including Waite Drive, Amelia Drive, and some of the connections in that area. That is currently estimated to be approximately $3.7 million. We've got two bridges, Massasoit and Millie's, that need to be reconstructed. Millie's, we are probably going to be looking at options for what it is now, perhaps some kind of a causeway-like structure. This is a coastal resiliency measure, and there may be grant funding available. Massasoit has had a lot of issues with trucks that are much too heavy going over it, and there's been some compromise there, and there's bridge reports every year that discuss repairs, but it needs to be reconstructed. When I say reconstructed, I mean, fortified and some aspects of it rebuilt or replaced.
And Millie's is almost filled in almost all the way underneath that. There's only a small bit of water now.
Yeah, that's
on the left
why
side.
we're probably going to look at a different sort of structure. And then we have some concession repairs to the concessions like Jetty, Surfside, and Children's Beach, and those are over the $1 million range. We've got our public safety auxiliary building of about $3 million, which failed at last year's town meeting, the election, I guess it failed at. But that is a needed building, and it'll be resubmitted for fiscal '21. Next are potential new projects of $1 million or more that have come up since last year's updates to the capital improvement plan. You all know about the Our Island Home design. That's intended to be submitted for 2020 annual town meeting of approximately $5 million. The senior center design is a TBD number. We are waiting on a RFP finalization. RFPs have come in for a feasibility study, which will include costs, and we'll have a number for town meeting for, I believe, design. And the Children's Beach Pump Station, I think you are all familiar with that. That is also a to-be-determined number. There's a study underway right now, which will not be complete by the time we need a number for town meeting, so we're going to use a best estimate for that, which will likely need to be on the high end so that we cover what needs to be done there. Potential needs direction projects that have also come up since the 2020 CIP was updated. There's been a lot of discussion about a water quality lab, and I know that there is work underway with respect to a kind of something of a cost-benefit analysis, and I've reviewed some numbers. I think there still needs to be a bit more work as to what it will cost and what realistically a lab might bring in revenue-wise. There's definitely going to be an operational impact on the town, and that might be able to be spread out among enterprise funds, but also there will be certainly an impact to the general fund. So one of the things that we've discussed, because it doesn't really have a specific departmental owner right now, is including it in our municipal space needs plan that is an initiative contained within the board's strategic plan. So that's just a recommendation. Underground wiring, I think you all know, is something that's been underway, discussed as to how to proceed with it going forward. It came up with the L8 project. And one of the things we've discussed internally is if the board and town agencies really want to see wires underground probably in particular areas like the downtown core, then we are really going to need some outside expertise to help figure out how this would be coordinated among at least the three utilities, as well as sewer, water, and stormwater. And that could be something of an expense. Probably an initial evaluation, kind of waiting on an estimated number. So I don't really want to put out a number right this second, but it's probably exceeds $1 million if we want to put that in for 21.
And what would that it would exceed $1 million just to figure out how to get it done?
I think that would be the evaluation of what it would take to coordinate. What are the areas where we might be able to phase? So just say, for example, I'm almost totally making this up, but let's take Gardner Street, because that's been an issue. What would it take to put wires underground on Gardner Street in terms of the coordination with, again, the three utilities, cable, electric, and telephone? What are there specifications for undergrounding? And then sewer water and stormwater, what are their specifications? How would it all mesh together? There needs to be an evaluation, like with electric, for example, of where their, I don't totally know what I'm talking about here, but where their major underground, hubs are and things that their vaults,
transmission,
their all of that stuff. There it is at some key places that we obviously can't see right now, but it may be that that's a bigger deal than we know about. So if we said, oh, we want to do Gardner Street, it might be better to do a different street and then come around to Gardner. So it's gonna take some kind of a pretty detailed evaluation.
But I think my sense, before we even spend $1 million to try to do a street or two and do engineering, I almost think what we need is what leverage do we have and how are we going to, get people at the table? I think it almost has to be what, because we've seen how it works. They all tell us why they can't do it. All the different utilities say it's not my problem, nothing I can do here. I think we almost need to have help first on, is it the ADA Act? Is it the 106 on if we're taking state or federal money? Is it whatever? We need a list of what are the leverage points that we have in discussions and negotiations with these guys, so they actually are willing to even have a conversation. Right now, they kind of don't seem very willing to have a conversation, really.
Well, I don't know that we've really initiated an effort to have a serious conversation.
Right.
And we can certainly get some legal review now about those things. That would be outside of the retainer, probably. Right. And I'm not really sure what that would cost. But I think our leverage is not overly beneficial to us, although there may be some, and I don't know if I want to talk about it in public because I don't want to give ideas about what we may or may not be able to do. But I hear what you're saying about the leverage issue.
Also, the feeling that I got from the LA discussion was a little bit of, pointing the finger at us saying, you don't really know what you need. So I feel that having some sort of an evaluation or plan so that we can say we know what we need and everyone else falls in line could be valuable.
But that's what they're giving was a passive aggressive answer. Well, just tell us what you need, and and we can't dictate to the other two, and we'll get to it maybe someday, and we aren't going to touch these poles because we know if we touch them, we hit the ADA, tripwire, so we can't do that. So I just think that we have more that we need to understand. How do we get this done? I mean, I think before we plan everything to get it done, how do we get it, the same point. So, I've been talking about it for 20 years. Libby's heard me. Libby's heard us. The last time we did it was a long time ago. So
we actually had discussion several years ago, if not 5 or more, about an appropriation to underground wires, to do an evaluation as to what it would take to underground wires along the truck route and sort of the house move route. And that was put before the board for discussion as to whether or not to include it, and it ultimately did not get put forward. So it definitely has come up before, but there hasn't been much of an appetite to proceed with it because it's quite costly, and it's going to cost the town to get the wires underground.
this may be a phase. It may be you're putting in the conduits, you're putting in as you're doing a road, maybe you're putting in the conduit banks, and then anytime, and then you're saying to the various utilities, when you touch these things on this road, you need to go back, you need to put it in the bank we've put there. So there may be a way to do it where we're taking the initial expense and bonding it over 20 or 30 years, but then, having a plan in place. So
yeah, it just is going to be costly. So we just need to understand that. And I'm only saying that because we have obviously a lot of projects that are costly. Fiscal 22 and out years, this is just overview for the board. These are, again, $1 million plus projects. We've got pending DPW facility design and construction. That would probably be design 1 year, construction the next. We've started hearing about the potential for a new or expanded middle school. That wouldn't be in 2022. It would be in a later year, maybe 10 or more years out, but it's starting to be discussed. Municipal offices remains an outstanding need and issue. It's planning for it is in the board's strategic plan. Coastal Resiliency Plan projects, there are going to be a lot of these, I think, as we move forward through the Coastal Resiliency Plan. and what their recommendations are ultimately going to be. So we don't totally know that, any numbers right at the moment. Strategic plan projects are likely to be some of those. Our hazard mitigation plan has something like 50 or more projects-ish that range in cost from fairly low to pretty high. And we're right now in the process of putting them into various years, and they are already ranked as low, medium, and high priority, but there's a lot, they span some different plans, and they're going to be important. Seasonal town employee housing, we have a $300,000 appropriation in the current fiscal year for feasibility study and design at the town property out adjacent to this building. We have not gotten that underway yet due to lack of resources to be able to issue an RFP for it, but the coming is going to be a construction number. And we have a number of projects that are going to be in the Parks Master Plan that some of them may be programmed in fiscal 21 that are less than $1 million, but there's probably a couple that exceed that number. So next steps are we're continuing the process, the review process, lots of CAPCOM meetings coming up, and admin and others are going to start reviewing funding sources, including free cash when it's certified. It'll be certified this month. We will be taking a look at prior year capital articles where the project has been completed and there be maybe funds left over. We have a minimum capital funding requirement in the budget, which is around $800,000 or $900,000 for fiscal 21. There may be potential grants. Potential grants often come with matching funds or in-kind contributions or something like that, but there may be opportunities out there that can help fund some of these projects. And then debt and capital exclusions are going to definitely be looked at. Do you want to add?
I had two things.
Yeah, go ahead.
The senior center, you had that in there as design, but I think in the feasibility study, we're seriously considering the property that would be a renovation. And I think the idea of the committee is that would actually be acquisition. Otherwise, there is nothing to design if we can't secure the property. So I think that's more of what we would be shooting for, is actual property acquisition.
Okay, I guess I'm sort of waiting to see how that pans out.
I would just say design and or
potential acquisition. Yep.
Just on that issue, do we know what changes to come up to code? Do we know what changes would have to happen there?
The property owner has done a report on it, and then our feasibility study will be.
Because I think that should be a requirement.
Our review of that.
The other way to do that is have that a requirement of the acquisition. If we have those changes be part of the acquisition. Okay.
That's a possibility.
Yeah.
I think that there's been willingness to work with us on that from the property owner.
Right.
Just the other thing I had was on the water quality, as we continue to discuss putting in a potential lab at some point. In the meantime, can we figure out how to send it more than once a week? I mean, it just, maybe that could alleviate the issues that we're having. And
we can talk to our departments. It's probably a resource and a money matter, but maybe.
That would just be my suggestion rather than waiting.
I just had a couple things to remind the board and the public, and I'll use the example of ceiling tiles. One department came in and wants to replace the ceiling tiles and the structures that hold them. And my point of bringing this up is this CapCon group looks at everything in detail. And I know sometimes at town meetings, someone can stand up and say, like, oh, why do we need this? This is just frivolous. We look at everything to the point where we said we didn't approve we're not going to suggest the entire structure for the ceiling tiles. We're going to scrape and paint them and just replace the ceiling tiles, not the structure. I use that as an example to show you how in depth we get on every capital ask. And if you're not in those meetings, it looks like we just kind of come up with something and here's what we're asking for. But this started we started early this summer, redefining kind of how we do everything. It gets a little better each year. It's things like the public safety auxiliary building. We really dig into that in detail and can look at the advantages of having something like that. $3 million just to store some some trucks and some vehicles, that's the quick look at it. But when you get down into the nitty gritty, I think Capcom, some things that could come out of that is to help us really understand the value of it and look at the numbers and what it'll cost us if we don't do that. The facilities master plan, or I think you labeled it the municipal space needs plan, is really going to help Capcom. Every question we come up, whether it's a DPW facility or how does it all fit in, what's it connect to, because everybody wants to know the out years. We want to know, when do we think the middle school is going to need to be built? Like, when do we always want to look at the out years. We weren't doing that as much my first year on Capcom. I think this is my third year on Capcom. Yeah, those are just my things, just to remind us kind of how our process and how in depth that we get.
On the DPW, is there any discussion of where the site should be for the DPW?
We haven't
just assumed.
We haven't dug into that one yet. That's kind of like our next. We went through all the enterprise funds, which we didn't do here, and then we've gone through the other departments.
Because my intuition is telling me it shouldn't be out there. When I look at the flood maps and the the storm surge and everything else in the next 10, 20, 30 years, I think that should be a really, anyway, I just hope that we're looking at that with a long-term view. So.
Thank you, Matt. That's all I had for Capcom.
Okay. Next, 2020 single-use plastics ban public outreach update. So I've got a little group that has a number of different people on it from all different areas. There are 2 board members, Christy and Rita, and we've got some other non-town people on there who've been helping us, including our citizen sponsor, Bruce Mandel. And just give the board a little update. We're really starting to get very as public as we can about this. And for everybody's reminder, the ban goes into effect on June 1st, 2020. It is for commercial sale and distribution. It is not applied to our own residential use. And it is for particular plastics which are listed here on this flyer. The flyer is online. We've sent it out pretty widely. We have a work group that's met 6 times so far. We have another meeting later on this month. We've had 3 public informational sessions. We may be scheduling more. They haven't been overly well attended, but they get a little bit better each time. We've met with the Nantucket Association of Real Estate Brokers, the Town Association, the Rotary Club, the Mass Beverage Association. We just had a phone call with them the other day. Local clubs, the Stop and Shop, and the Nantucket Community Association. We're working on meetings with Cumberland Farms, nonprofits and caterers, and the Nantucket Builders Association. They might be scheduled at this point, but we haven't met with them yet. Our public outreach includes a public service announcement on the radio. Veritas has agreed to run an article this fall. We're working on some videos, interviews on NCTV and also Geno TV. There's been several items in the Town Manager e-newsletter, which comes out monthly, and we've done an email blast to all licensed food establishments. Other initiatives include more water filling stations around the island, including at Stop and Shop. The Land Bank has agreed to add some to some of their properties. We had an attendee at one of our public informational sessions, I think it might have been you, Jason, who suggested an audit, that we could send somebody in to kind of give a little audit of a business to say what does and does not comply and what some of the alternatives are.
A voluntary
audit, yes. Sorry, thank you.
Because I would want one. I would love to have somebody
required.
come in and help me think through how to do small business. What are the changes I never thought of that
Exactly.
are cost effective?
We were thinking we could even film something like that so that people could see it. Bruce has prepared some boards that have alternatives on them. It shows the item to be banned, and then he's got some alternatives on there. The NAREB group, Nantucket Association of Real Estate Brokers, has agreed to put a mailer in their correspondence to visitors coming to the island about this. We're hopefully going to have posters on the boats and in the Hyannis ferry terminals. We've talked about a kind of a recognition campaign that can recognize groups that are totally compliant, how they did it. And the Nantucket Lands Council is agreeing to spearhead involvement in the schools. So we're doing a lot on this. And even so, I get people to say they don't know anything about this. And does it apply to them? Are they still going to be able to buy K-Cups at the Stop and Shop? And the answer to that is no. Christy or Rita, do you guys want to add anything?
No, I was just going to say we're really focused on education over enforcement, and it's going to be the commercially banned single-use plastic, so you still will be able to purchase, through Amazon. So we're always advocating not to. We did try reaching out to Amazon. They will still ship here, unfortunately. But yeah, it's just about getting the public involved and on board with this.
I was going to mention too that there's a lot of information on the website, and we have established an email address. If anybody has any questions at all, it's acplasticsban, all one word, acplasticsban at nantucket-ma.gov. And I don't think we've gotten too many emails on there. It's a little long, but we're hoping.
But there's also the FAQ, and every time we hold a session and new questions are asked, we add it to the FAQ.
Yep. The public informational sessions have been pretty interesting. At every one of them, I would say, even though there's not a lot of people, there's always some good comments and questions and ideas and thoughts and things we haven't really thought of. So it's been really interesting. We're also looking at what the Vineyard is doing. We've heard people say, oh, the Vineyard has a ban. The Vineyard does not totally have a ban. First of all, there are 6 different towns there that all have something a little bit different. 2 of the towns I think we found so far have some type of bottle ban pending before the Attorney General's office. It is not approved yet. 1 or 2 of them have banned plastic bags, but some of their towns are quite small, so they haven't really needed to do outreach. I think Aquina banned water bottles, if I'm remembering correctly, and they didn't have to do much because there's only 4 places there that sell them, and obviously there's other towns that you could go to pretty easily. So we're trying to get that research done, though, and see what other towns are doing for outreach.
And I just want to add that the tone so far, I think, from businesses has been fairly positive, with some of them taking action already. So that's been great to see.
Yeah, I would want to recognize Stop and Shop a bit, because they've been they've been readily coming to the table with us and talking about it, and they have some of their own ideas, and they seemed very willing to install like industrial water filling stations at their stores. Obviously there are details that need to be worked out, but they've been good to work with so far, and they invited some of us on a tour even before the AG had approved the final article.
They're one of the few people that gets the plastic. They get their plastic off the island. They get their cardboard off and recycle it.
Yep.
The plastic film and the others goes off and gets turned to waste energy, and they pay to do that. And they also, any of the plastic that they do get goes off and gets recycled somewhere in, I think that's in New Hampshire. So so they're working on that. Do we know what happens with plastic in our digester yet? Has that finally been figured out?
No.
Okay.
Well, I think we know it is not composting, but
It isn't, okay.
I'm not sure we know.
Compostable plastic isn't composting. Okay.
We have not been able to find a way to easily figure that out.
Right. Because one of the things I think that we need to talk about as this moves forward, and I'm supportive of this, and I'm doing as much as I can in my business, and we're going to change things over. But one of the big things, we have trouble as a town getting enforcement done and getting this done. We can't do this because we don't have employees. The same thing is happening with the haulers and with some of the businesses and things. And so, one of the thoughts, we should be doing a test, I think, and sending sort of the bales off and seeing if they can go to CMAS or somewhere else. My long term, I think we're going to have to, at 20 years, 30 years from now, we're going to be digging that entire hill out and trying to get rid of it, or it's going to be going into the ocean. So it might be smarter and easier to figure out where can it go now if there's a place, and we may have to test that. And I know that isn't kind of what this is about and the direction that we're pointing, but I think that it's, if we want to get compliance, there's going to have to be a lot more people hired at the landfill doing that work. In order to hire them, you have to have a place to put them, which is what everyone that has employees has to do. So there's a bunch of steps that are going to be very expensive if this is actually really going to be positive and successful. It's going to be more than the easy steps. It's going to be more than, the education. It's going to be hiring people, housing people, sorting the trash properly to begin with. And so we have a long way to go, and I hope we don't lose. I'm happy that we're doing it. I hope we don't lose the momentum.
I hope we can figure out a way to keep things separated within the same trucks so that we're not adding more vehicles on the road to make this all work. That's a worry of mine.
So that
they could use multi-compartment trucks.
the waste stream separation, which is what you're talking about, is different from this. This is a component of waste, certainly, and solid waste management. But we do have a separate staff group that has a couple of other people on it, and we're trying to revamp it right now. And we're going to be really getting down to business here. We've been meeting fairly regularly, and there's been monthly waste summit, solid waste management summit meetings, and that's gained a lot of information. And we're having our consultant look into a number of different things, including what technology there might be from waste to energy. That is an issue that requires a lot of analysis as to, there's volume issues, there's permitting issues, there's cost issues, there's a lot to consider. And there's a lot to consider with the waste stream too. A lot of the things that Matt mentioned are definitely issues, but it's also changing behaviors and probably improving the equipment at the MRF that is, sorts things better, cleans things better. It's much easier to send clean, totally separated loads off than mixed loads. Those are difficult to manage. And not only that, but obviously we have global issues right now with plastics and recyclables, and the market is, not there. So we're not selling any of the recyclables.
There is a market for really clean virgin stuff of the right type.
Yeah.
But the difficulty of that, it has to be clean,
Mhm.
it has to be separated. So then you go to and then you're at the point where you say, have we set up the right rules and regulations so that we have a separated, clean stream that's valuable? And what I would argue right now is that because we have such a mix of plastics, there's no one out there that knows which plastic is which. There's no way to know, is that a recyclable plastic or is that a compostable? What type compostable? How long does it take? Like, they're all different numbers. I've looked at all of them, and it's really confusing. You'd spend all day. So how are we going to do that? And in the short term, I'm not sure that you can. I think you can get some of it done, but in the short term, I think we've got to find another solution. But that's
we're getting way off this
We are.
agenda item.
But I
So
think
it's a good conversation.
I think it's,
and-
but I'm requesting it be a conversation
Yeah.
soon
Mhm.
because we're pushing certain aspects that influence the other aspects. And I think if we don't look at it fully, we're going to get to the spring and we're going to have a bunch of people here going crazy. So
Agreed.
yeah, all right.
Can I just make one point as well? Because I think, Matt, what you're talking about as well is this idea of a clean stream. All of this really, the end goal isn't necessarily just a clean stream. It's so that we stop landfilling. And one thing that you've brought up several times, and because they're here, I just wanted to think about that question of what if we did have to mine the whole landfill because of coastal resiliency, because of sea level rise, and that going back to something I should have asked further, whether or not that's something that the committee will be looking at, because at the end of the day, we need to understand in the next couple of years what we are going to do. So I still think that, and I've said it a couple times, the system we currently have may be imperfect, but it is the best step we can take towards transitioning towards that next solution, not the final answer, but the next solution. So I do think, again, that this is a very important part of that.
Madam Chair, I just want to back to the report. I really like the recognition campaign. It's a positive way to get people to incentivize them to do something. Like, oh, they're doing that. Okay, I can do it. Versus going the other way of shaming people. You can always shame them and inspect and that kind of thing. But I think starting off with the recognition campaign is very helpful and positive. So if we can put as much focus on that as we can, I think it's great.
That's great. Select boards, reports, and comments. We decided to just bring this back after we got into the school year a little bit to discuss the stop signs at Bartlett Road again and to see if anybody feels any differently.
I don't feel any differently than last time. it's an intersection that I use regularly, not necessarily during school pickup and drop off. But I do feel like it still is a better option in terms of pedestrian and cyclist safety than not having them. So I would be in favor of keeping them.
Yeah, I've been getting pretty positive feedback lately. I think people have gotten used to it, and
Is that the point of the discussion tonight? Is it a action to take them out or not? Is that?
yeah, I mean,
Okay.
that was really what we said we would bring back.
Okay.
And if anybody from the public has any comment, they're welcome.
Can I just ask a question? Mike?
Oh, yeah, you're second.
Patrick Tafe, I think the stop sign works. It's the most fair, equitable way to move through Bartlett and Surfside Road. And, I heard other comments from people over the summer that, oh boy, we have to wait now. But I think if you have a rotary, you're going to move people to Four Corners faster, and you'll be backed up all the way to the rotary. And it just works. It slows cars down just enough that it flows. If there's 20, 25 cars in front of you sometimes this summer, you find it's not a 5-10 minute wait. It's just a couple of minutes, and you keep moving. I say keep the stop signs. Stop signs, yeah.
Okay.
Walter Flaherty, I'm also in agreement with keeping the stop sign, and I don't think it's a problem up there. I think the other proposed item that you've talked about going up there would not work with the number of children crossing that intersection, riding their bikes to school. And do you have any statistics on the number of accidents prior to that stop sign being installed versus since it's been installed?
That's a setup. Go on, Christy.
Do you have the data, Kristen?
I was going to say at our April meeting, that Chief Pittman said there was, I think, 6 accidents the year prior and none up until when we installed them in April for that 6-week trial that we had, but I don't have the current data.
I haven't heard through the grapevine of any, and I also haven't heard any complaints. If anything, I've heard positive comments on keeping the stop sign. So,
Hi, Judy Zerheide. Please keep the stop signs. I'm all for it. No more rotary, please. Stop sign.
Well, right now we're deciding whether to keep the stop signs or to take them out.
Okay.
The roundabout has already undergone significant property acquisitions and so forth, but we're not really talking. We put that on the agenda in case anyone brought it up, but that's really not what we're deciding on tonight.
Okay. Please keep the stop signs. Thank you.
Hi, Campbell Sutton. I propose the stop signs, and I really find that they work. It's been so incredibly safe when I watch people and children go back and forth. It's pretty free. There was one situation developing that I was glad the DPW took care of, and it's also, I've noticed it at fairgrounds and Surfside, where bicyclists decide to go diagonally across the road. It's like this, and instead of going across going across, they just sort of shoot across the middle of the road. That didn't seem very safe, but they have put up a barrier there, so that has stopped there anyway. The other thing I would say, and this goes to the roundabout or rotary, I did happen to read the article, and so just a couple of things. One, in the discussion of the Milestone Road tonight, I heard some of the select board members making arguments based on their own experience of the road in question. And I think that's great, but I think that also gives other residents of other areas of the island the right to also advocate for their own space and be equally heard, even though we're not in a position of power to say, well, I think, therefore. But I think, as a select board, you are put in a position by the voters to represent what the voters hope you will represent, and not necessarily your own opinion. Sometimes your own opinion will be in conflict with, what the voters are actually asking the town to do. And I feel like in this case, this Rotary and a couple of the packages, I was really glad to see that you're pulling the package apart for, the new town road improvements and like that. I think, personally, I think we have a very intelligent and informed community, those who participate. Okay, there's always going to be those who don't, but for those that do, and I know from listening last year, there were a lot of people that really wanted the new town improvements, but they didn't like the rest of the stuff that went with it. So they're like, well, then never mind. So I think it's really going to be a benefit, and you'll really get some good direction from the voters. I realize that there's been property acquisition towards this. If I recall, and someone will tell me I'm wrong, but anyway, if I recall, one of the options for the Poets Corner property acquisition was for a right-hand turn lane, which was the way it was initially presented. It didn't become a rotary until later when they purchased the property across the street where the house is. I really think that personally, I think that since the stop signs have gone in, I think that a lot of town staff, money, time is being focused on something that the voters have already said they're not interested in. And I would like to see a more appropriate response to the wishes of the voters, and not just those people are so stupid they just don't know. Well, actually, we do know. We experience it. We experience the Hooper Farm Rotary, and that doesn't stop people from getting backed up in traffic for 15 minutes. So, something at the Nobadir and Milestone. Okay, I could see where what you're really trying to do is keep traffic moving, and they're not just moving to the next stop sign quickly, right? You're really trying to keep a flow going. There's no schools in the area. There's minimum cross-street traffic. So why not propose to put some of the resources there? It sounded like in the paper, and I could be wrong because I just got it out of the paper, but that there was about $400,000 appropriated for something with this Rotary or what have you, which I think one could shift focus to something more needful, or, maybe even do something like new swing sets, or, there's a lot of things that people would really like to see the money go through. And as a state taxpayer, I'm not sure that I really want my state taxes going to this when their proportion is so disproportionate, right? 400,000 to 2.6 million as an input by the state. Anyway, I'm really against those, obviously, in that location. It just is not safe. I've been to Hyannis. I've heard their argument in Hyannis that, they have one at the school, right? Well, that's on North Street. I don't know how many people actually visit North Street, but they have crossing guards for that. It is the only roundabout in the Hyannis area where they actually even have pedestrian way. Okay, the major Rotary by the airport, they are not asking people to cross. They don't encourage people to cross because it's so busy. I feel that the intersection of Bartlett and Surfside is a busy intersection. It's not just the occasional car or just kids in the morning or kids in the afternoon when you can have a crossing guard. There are people using it all day long, all season long. And the safety that everyone witnesses and the lack of stress that you experience, no more trying to bolt out into the road to get in. I think those are all real positive things for our community, especially in our end of the, for the people who live on Bartlett and travel down Surfside Road. So thank you for listening to me.
Madam Chair, I just want to make one comment to Campbell. I don't think anybody on this board, and I know everybody pretty well, thinks any voter is stupid. I've never heard any comments like that from anybody on this board of being condescending to to any voter on anything. I think it's the opposite. I think we listen really well overall as a board. I think, I'm not going to speak for this board, but I think when the whole stop signs came up in the beginning, we were kind of like, I think it's gonna mess up traffic. Everybody's gonna yell at us. But then we listened to everybody and we kind of said, all right, let's let it stay. Everybody, I'm getting no comments no negative comments. So I think we did listen. I just want to make sure you feel that you don't. I want to make sure that you understand that we don't think like that. I don't know anybody on this board who is like that way. That's it.
Yeah.
Hello, my name's Tim Lepre. I'm on the school committee. I had my business down there on Bartlett Road for several months. I think that the stop signs are an ideal solution to that problem. I view it as a risk to our children. We had a crossing guard hit down there by a car. I see kids, when I was working down there, dodging across there. I think the stop signs have really improved that situation. It's cheap, it's semi-mindless, but it works really very well. So I really am a big supporter of the stop signs, and I think they work tremendously well. Thank you.
Again, so just to your point, and it's not necessarily this board, but there are people, they have even said it in the newspaper, they've said it at town meeting where they have derided voters because they didn't vote the way they wanted them to because they just didn't think the voters understood, when maybe they do, or maybe they don't understand well enough because it hasn't been, put forward in a transparent enough fashion. But so this is my feeling, when people continue to act, so like when the voters have voted against something, and that twice, 3 times even, and then certain people try and figure out how to get around having to even go to the voters. That to me is saying that they view the voters as an impediment to their getting their desire through, not everyone's, not the collective desire. So that's more what I'm pointing to is the continuation of pursuing something that has been voted against, and then taking the time and energy to figure out how not to have to go to the voters to keep pushing something forward that the voters have voted against. So, and I find that insulting. But that's a personal thing. So, thanks for addressing that.
Go ahead.
Just Nat, maybe you'll be able to answer as well, but I was thinking Andrew might help. Because a lot of these decisions and some of the votes at town meeting came before I was on the board. I was hoping to clarify what has already been voted on to date in regards to turning this into a rotary. And then my other question, I think is really for Andrew, is if the rotary was meant to solve for traffic flow and safety, what additional benefits? Right now we're hearing more opposition to the rotary, support for stop signs and stop signs having solved those 2 issues. Do you see significant additional benefits still from the rotary? And were those the original reasons to install a rotary?
That was a good question.
You can pass it to Andrew if you want.
Let me just back up the train here, because I think we're going back to trains sometimes. First of all, we're having like a Yankees-Red Sox debate here a little bit. That's never going to go anywhere, okay? Roundabouts work. That's just a fact. That's not an opinion. They're getting put in all over the country now. I Googled some things the other day, I almost fainted how much stuff is going on. Just talked to somebody that they just put 2 in another town in Mass. I mean, look, we kind of like things to never change, even though we complain sitting in traffic. We blame traffic for not needing, for a lot of things. We're constantly complaining. So that's fine. As a community, what I think we need to do is possibly remove the roundabout that works and go back to nothing. Because Matt and I discuss this all the time. The Newtown Road issue that has now been brought back to life with the new cut through of the First Way has added more cars, which I didn't even realize until I was told that by a few other people. So the people that have been cutting through there for 12 years to get to the roundabout because it works are now cutting through the First Way because it's paved. So every time we improve one little thing, it does redirect people because the people are smart and they know that it works. They might vote against it, but they know it works. So I think we're at this like point at this moment in this community, sort of like if we had to vote for the fast ferry, we probably would have said hell no in 1995. So we need to decide if we want none, because that if we don't add more, we're not going to fix anything. So we need to remove them all so we go back to every intersection being the way it was, with just more cars. So to answer your question, though, Rita, I don't have a perfect answer. I know that the Bartlett Road one was on the tip, so it's the state funded, that particular one. The high school one, I call it the high school one, the four corners, whatever, the one that we actually talked about in like 2004. That was the first one we talked about. And that one there is just in different design ideas and has shifted around and different things. So there's no status or anything. But the voters approved the Newtown Road article that did have the other roundabout in it, approved it at town meeting. It failed by 16 votes at the ballot box. And the day we voted, we shut down half of Milestone Road for the sewer connection. So everybody was probably angry that day, so they voted against it. That's my thought. So, and it is true. That's when it happened. So, I think leaving the stop signs is a no-brainer for now. Okay? One other thing you have to talk about is the trucks leaving that section of the island. There's a lot of long trucks that go down Bartlett Road. And when they come out, they need to turn right. And the only way they can turn right is to stay on the left side of the road, which is not a perpendicular road. So the wheels you have to go all the way across the road to make that turn. So I'm just saying, if that's what we want to live with, and we think that's great and safe and wonderful, then that's what we need to do. Walter, you get out there, we can take out that artwork, that other roundabout, get rid of it, and go back to what it used to be. Thank you.
Tit for tat, but I don't think it's an all or nothing proposition, and I think that's excessive to put it like that. There are appropriate places and not appropriate places for that to occur. If at some time in the future, the high school one that Mr. Lowell just referred to is in place, okay, then maybe, and you move the school, maybe it does make some kind of sense. But right now, if it goes in first, all you're doing, okay, couple things. On a rotary, like at Hooper Farm and at Milestone, when you're going around that, you have 4 options of where to get out, and everybody's going in a different direction, right? And in Europe, the majority, which is often used, several points there, in this situation, you're not going anywhere. You're just putting more cars on the road. It's now you take a right or you take a left, but it's not like you're going to head off to Sconset. You're just either going to the beach or you're going into town or you're going down Bartlett Road, the same as you are with a stop sign. The European issue, I think, has a few problems as an argument. One is that both vehicles, personal vehicles and commercial vehicles, do not even compare in size. to the American concept of a personal vehicle and these trucks. And now I see that they're coming on with a double sleeper cab. So it seems to me really that there should be more restrictions on widths of trucks, lengths of trucks with a tag along, that kind of thing, but nobody wants to really address that, so that's fine. But so it's sort of apples and oranges there. It would be like trying to put your American refrigerator into your European kitchen. You know, they don't fit very well, or you give up an awful lot of space. So yes, they have a lot of them historically. In general, the ones that I have used in Switzerland, England, and France, and Germany, all are going somewhere else. You know, you're going to take Route 10 whatever to the right, you keep going, you go off in another direction. You're not going to meet up anywhere because it's taking you to different places, like at Milestone. So I didn't want to have the impression, leave you with the impression that I'm against all rotaries. I just think that there are areas that they're appropriate and areas that they're not, and I think that has to be sifted out, and they're not just everywhere. Thank you.
I'm not going to wade into the question of whether a stop sign or a roundabout is appropriate at this particular location, but the Historical Commission has talked generally about roundabouts on Nantucket and designs of roundabouts on Nantucket. We've also been asked to comment on the 25% plan as part of the Section 106. We haven't submitted that. We'll probably do that after we talk about it at our October meeting. But I did want to put something out because I have read a lot about roundabouts recently as part of this. And there are Federal Highway Administration guidelines on different types of designs of roundabouts. And I think the direction that our commission is leaning is to encourage Nantucket to use roundabouts. Again, I'm not talking about specific locations, but just in general. But to consider maybe more than we have been, the mini roundabout. This is actually a technical term. A mini roundabout is 60 to 90 feet across, and it has a fully transversible central island. So basically a truck can use it because it can drive through it if it needs to and go across the island. I think this has tremendous potential for Nantucket. And in fact, for this particular location, the town hired Greenman Pedersen in 2010 to make a recommendation, and their highest recommendation was a mini roundabout. That was how we first thought about the mini roundabout concept. They generally can fit in an existing roadway, so you don't need to acquire additional land. So I'll just leave it at that with the idea that we talk and think about mini roundabouts more on Nantucket. Maybe we can hear from the planning director about that as well. I also just want to say one other thing, which is just because we acquired the land, it's now a sunk cost, it has other uses. I don't think we need to think about this as something that has to happen because of a decision that was made in the past. And I would hope, I'm speaking as an individual now, that we weigh all of our decisions with information that we have now, not because of past actions that we've taken. Thank you.
Just thought of something to answer Rita's question. One more thing. Sorry, everyone. Milestone Rotary, that really isn't anything like a roundabout. It's a three-way stop and a yield. We voted at town meeting last April to give the state a blessing to make it into a roundabout. Okay, just so everyone knows that did happen. That doesn't mean it's going to happen, but especially now that the land bank has the land that we needed, and we have to go to the state to get that little piece back that was there. That was easy before. So that could prove that they work to this community, at least a majority, if that was done. With the other one before we tear it out, kind of joking, but I'm kind of serious at the same time, because that's how we need to think. If we fix Milestone, and maybe that will be the test for everyone's mindset about roundabouts. But at the moment, it's not a roundabout. And that's that simple. That isn't an opinion. It's not a roundabout. Thanks.
I just wanted to say I am always open to changing my mind. I just think we have some obligation to recognize what town meetings have done prior and try to move those things forward. But if there's new information and new wills and new ideas, of course we will review that. Take that into consideration.
Can I just ask one question? Were those two, I think there were two land acquisitions. Were those specifically and definitively land acquisitions for a rotary? Roundabout, sorry. No.
They're very different things. The first acquisition, I mean, there was going to be buildings built crowding that particular intersection. And so the first acquisition was clearly to prevent that from happening. The second acquisition was clearly for the roundabout. Again, you're the Board of Public Works here, and it's like, you know, we're early in the process, and I understand are you going to make some sort of vote tonight, or is that going to be?
No, this is to vote on the stop.
Okay, so let us know, because we do have other projects, and it's, you know, I don't have any stake in whether this moves forward or not, but there have been votes along the way. The design money was appropriated specifically for a roundabout in Article 10. There's no question about that.
How much of that has been spent? Ballpark.
I don't know off the top of my head.
Wasn't it like 200,000, 250?
Yeah, we're responsible. This is, you know, and again, there's no magic or hidden anything here.
Right.
When we apply, when a project is on the tip list, we're responsible for the right-of-way and the design, and then the case is made for state funding. And that's, I mean, there's no secrets here on that.
Yeah, no, I'm not saying there is.
Not with any of you, it's certainly. So that's happened throughout our entire history here. So, but if you want to rethink it and, you know, let us know before, you know, obviously the Historical Commission is spending time on it, reviewing it here at the 25%. And, you know, so are our consultants and everyone else.
So just to clarify, we would need some additional acquisitions and finish the design, and then we would be applying to the state for the funding.
We have to have, in order for the project to advance to the state, we need the right-of-way completely intact, and we need the design finished. Okay. And the design will follow the similar path of like Amelia Drive and some of the other projects where there are stages of the design, there are recommendations that come to you. I mean, you are responsible for the, you know, I think to take input from different, the Historical Commission, the Planning Commission, they're advisory. Mm-hmm. And ultimately you have to decide.
And we're partway through both of those then, design and acquisition.
We're in the 25% stage right now.
Okay, right.
Thanks.
Which is why I was asking about how much have we expended. Because if the thing is we're going to keep it even for 5 years, we say we'll keep the stop signs, maybe you don't spend the, if it's 275 and we spent 50, you know, 250 and we spent 50, there's 200, it could be spent. You know, so anyway, we have to think about that before we get too far along, if that's where we're going. I agree with Andrew on that. There's a psychology of previous investment where people try to, you know, once you spend a certain amount, then you're just, oh, well, we spent it, we have to do it. But you have to be really careful to overcome that, because you don't want to, you know, if you learn something's a bad mistake, a lot of times people still just go forward with a bad mistake because they've paid so much. You know, well, we'll fix it next time. I think you want to fix it. On all these roundabouts, I wasn't sure about the 1 year Stop and Shop. It does work. I agree with Nat that it does. I think the question that I still have is, these are designed to move, you know, cars more quickly to another place. I would like to see traffic modeling to know what happens at the other places. You know, I want to make sure that we are not just moving the problem from one location to 2 other locations. You know, I agree with doing milestone 100%, you know, I think, and so I just think we need to, you know, be cognizant of what is that going to do? And that's possible. I was on a phone call with Mike Burns and a couple guys from the state, and they said we have an ideal place to do traffic modeling. We have an idea, because it's a closed environment. We can get projections. We can know what's going to happen at Five Corners and Caton Circle and everywhere else before we go ahead and spend 15 or 20 million for 6 roundabouts and find out that all we do is we need more everywhere else. I think where we're heading is an urban grid from downtown to the airport with a few collector roads having mini roundabouts or roundabouts, but we should be thinking about it globally and looking at the whole thing. And I don't think we're there yet.
I think not this evening, but at some point I would like to hear, again, what additional benefits the Rotary will bring us in safety and traffic flow. And if there are projects that are more important, depending on how significant those benefits are at this point in time, if there are other projects that are more important for the state funding, then maybe the focus does shift. Not to say that we don't come back to this at some point, but I just would like to know if the stop signs are doing what we need them to do. Are there better places to focus for the moment?
Just to give you my pedestrian and bicycle thoughts, I don't want to make any decisions to improve and spend a lot of money on intersections if it's only a car-centric decision. We need to move away from focusing on car-centric advantages. So I don't think roundabouts can be designed to have more focus on pedestrian and bicycle safety. And I've talked to Dr. Lepre and so many people who think that the opposite of what I do. I think they're more safe for pedestrians. I really do. And I've seen the stats, and so if the public in general doesn't want it, then we'll put the funding to Tom Nevers bike path or another project like Rita's saying that's got public backing and is improving safety for pedestrian and bicycles, which is what we want more people to do. We want to get them out of cars. All right. Remember the 6% of single-use automobile rides. Right? So I want every intersection to be safer. If we decide this particular one, a roundabout, is not safer, then let's find something else. Let's move where you cross when you're on Surfside. Let's move it 100 feet back. Let's curve it in. So there's got to be a different way of. That's the biggest advantage right there is people crossing here versus there.
It's the diagram of the design to date, I believe.
Yeah, I still find that the way that bike path crosses, even with the stop signs, feels very unsafe to me.
That's going to be unsafe whether we have stop signs or not. And so the bottom part over there, that's the biggest advantage, along with having the sidewalk on the other side. Like those are two really big advantages. Maybe that can be done without a roundabout, but that's the way I see these, through the lens of the bicycle and pedestrian safety. Obviously, there's safety for cars because there's less impact points, so there'll be less, fender benders there as well. Just want to get my thoughts on the record.
Yeah. Well, I agree. I believe in roundabouts. I believe that they are safer, but it's not going to kill me if we don't put one in this location. Yeah. I think that there are some other locations I'd actually rather see one first, but I also think they function well together. Mm-hmm. But I mean, for right now, I think the stop signs are helping with a safety problem. Yes, mm-hmm. Brooke, would you like to say something?
My name is Brooke Moore, and I drive and bike through that intersection multiple times a day. And the stop signs make it better, but it's still not great. It is still not great. Bikers don't stop. It's still a really dangerous intersection, and I look at that image and I think that's an improvement. And I think there's a lot of kids going through there, and I see the potential for that to be an improvement for safety. But I'll just leave it at that.
Well, there's a report from Traffic National Safety, about 400 pages about roundabouts. I'll send them. They'll tell you the difference between this and a mini one and a bigger one and how they all work. And, you can spend hours on it. But there are definitely differences between this and a mini one and other types. And so it's worth a read, especially if this is going to be something that we ultimately have to decide then we should do our homework. So I'll send that tomorrow.
Okay, do you want to take a vote on the stop signs, or unless anyone else has another comment?
Move to approve move to keep the stop signs.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. We'll continue talking about roundabouts. Committee reports?
I just have one. There was the second Waste Summit meeting. I would say it was a little bit light on the attendance. The haulers were there, and some members of the public. And the focus was compost, what we have, what some of the options are. I think JP from Waste Options does a great presentation every time, so I highly recommend attending one of them. Each of the next meetings will have a different subject, so you can find one that suits. But they are very helpful, just continuing to understand what's going on and what the options are for the future.
Yeah, they've been really good.
Was that the composting thing on last Thursday?
Yeah.
Okay.
All of my meetings have been plastic, so that's the update.
CPC is continuing to have the interviews. There's one more round tomorrow, and then we'll go into deliberations. But we're still waiting to find out what the actual full funding is going to be, so we won't really be able to make final decisions till sometime the end of the month, and just in time to get it in on the warrant. I did present the strategic plan to the Rotary Club today, as Christy mentioned earlier, and I thought it was well received, as it was at the Civic League, and not a ton of questions. I mean, I think people feel like it's really quite thorough, and they ask a few things and make a few statements, but
great.
It was good.
I had Coastal Resiliency Tuesday, but they gave us an update earlier, so I'm off the hook. The only other comment, I was out to Great Point on this weekend, one of the sunny days, just for a little bit. And I didn't realize you're not supposed to walk to the point. I saw the sign for, don't park, don't drive down there, but I didn't see the sign that says don't walk. So I walked down like a dummy. And I was shocked at the amount of seals. The humans don't have access to Great Point any longer. It's a seal habitat. One thing that struck me is what happens when they start breeding and Great Point becomes, a west part of the island, Muskegon. If they haul up there and start breeding there, what happens? And so it's just interesting. We don't have that much control. It's Fish and Wildlife. There's been conversations between the town and Fish and Wildlife over the years. They still have control of it, and I'm not sure. It's interesting. And there was probably 50 or 100 seals all right in the break there, and it was a whole different world than I remember. So, and you can see the results of sort of what's happening, with the movement. One thing at Coastal Resiliency that we showed the other day was, and we should do it here on camera at some point, is how much movement there's, how much we've had of the beach has been lost already, especially from the South Shore. It's about 11 feet a year. We've had 14 inches of sea level rise in the last 100 years. And so we don't really think about that. We don't realize it, but we've been tracking it here, and we know that. And so, these things are going to continue, and how do we deal with that is going to be pretty interesting. So
There's a really great map that shows all of the lines all around the island.
it does. And there's a Google map where it will show you the last, they've been taking shots from, it's probably been since, 90s, mid 90s. And it shows you the changes just in that period of time, and it's automatic. It's on the website, and you can go and play with it, and you can pick any part of the island and watch what happens. In Nantucket, it's unbelievable how much it shifts and changes and comes back, but the trends, and on the North Shore, there's places that haven't moved much at all. But
There's some places that have eroded quite a bit, too, in Dionys.
Yeah, but there's, yeah, so we've got our work cut out for us.
Anything else?
I'd make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Those in favor? Oh,
Completely separate from what you have on your agenda. This week, apparently the DPW removed all the plantings from the center of the Milestone Rotary, and I just wanted to know why.
we're putting grass in.
Why?
Maintenance.
It seems to me that mowing grass frequently is a lot more maintenance intensive than weeding plantings a couple times a season.
The DPW director could probably address that, but it is not much easier to mow something that's unencumbered with any shrubs whatsoever than have the DPW go out there and weed it.
I think it's a real loss for the community.
We reviewed it with some stakeholders. I appreciate your perspective, but we've talked about this internally, reviewed it with some other stakeholders that have been involved in the plantings previously, and there wasn't an objection to it. Not that other people won't object to it, but it's viewed as a maintenance issue. You probably saw it over the summer. That and the Mid-Island roundabout, they were weed infested, and we cannot keep up with it. So the decision was made to grass it.
I'm surprised that there weren't other alternatives considered, either volunteer or funding from an organization that might want to have plantings, or putting it out to bid for a contract for maintenance. I'm shocked.
We have tried the volunteer route, unsuccessful. We have tried to get other organizations to do it, unsuccessful.
It worked for a while.
It worked for a while, but it peters out and people can't commit to that. And a contract with a landscaper is A, very expensive, and B, we got, I think, maybe one bid, and no one wants to do that work. So.
Thank you for the explanation.
Sure. Thanks, Mary. So we had a motion to adjourn. All those in
Second.
favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously.
Thank you.